Anyone ever found a body? What's that like? My friend from school crashed his van outside my house one night coming back from a party. He was 15 and driving illegally. It was about 1 AM and I heard the crash and was first on the scene. I didn't have a cell phone, so I wasn't the one who called 911. He died on impact, and seeing his body was the moment I no longer felt like a kid. We were out hunting one night and came up on a car wrapped up and around a tree. Blood everywhere. Turned out to be a guy a few years older who had been drinking, missed a curve, and shot into the woods. I'll never forget that sight. Saw him around school a few days prior. Yeah. You sort of lose your innocence after seeing a classmate explode into a windshield. Insane and tragic. In November of 2004, I had a very best friend who lived 3 blocks from me. We were both managers of the same restaurant, but I had recently graduated from college and had started my career path, but still worked with him on weekends and school vacations. One freezing cold Monday night, the restaurant called saying he hadn't shown up for work. I had a key, so my roommate and I walked over. Upon entering his apartment, he was dead on the couch after taking more than 1 bottle of Ambien and a handle of vodka. I don't remember all the details of what I remember from the scene or what it looked like in paying a lot of money in therapy to forget. Went to check on my uncle because he'd not been heard from. I knew before I got the front door open that he was dead by the smell. He was in his recliner, drank himself to an early grave. I fear that this is going to be how I find my mom. When you walked in and knew by the smell, did you still go and look at him or call the police first? I'm one of the people who gets that call. Don't go in and look. Just don't. It's not what you think it's gonna be. They could very well be a bloated, discolored mess or an unrecognizable, gelatinous pile with maggots and flies everywhere. Either way, no one wants or needs that picture of a loved one seared into their memory. Edit. No one really thinks or plans for this, but if you ever find yourself in this rough spot, there's gross stuff that needs to be cleaned. Don't feel like you have to do it yourself. That's equally traumatizing. Contact homeowners insurance or search yourself for local crime scene cleanup companies or biohazard cleanup. We found a body washed up in the rocks on the beach. I was taking photos of vultures because they were sitting on the rocks and they were pretty large. I first saw his distended stomach and followed it down to his foot. I grabbed my husband and said, "That's a body. Is that a body? Oh my gosh, that's a body!" Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. After double checking, we walked away to call 911. Checking a third time. From a different angle, I saw some of his skull missing and the unmistakable human hand. Somehow, we were able to get cell service long enough to tell the 911 dispatcher which state park we were in. Ambulance, firefighters, state police, a Coast Guard helicopter, truck and boat all showed up. It was amazing to watch. They carried him up in a body bag, placed him on the asphalt and left him there for 30 minutes. It was just another day to first responders. Oddly, we are thankful to have found him because he was on part of the beach no one ever crosses the river to get to. The tide was coming in when he was pulled out. Had we not found him when we found him, the crabs and vultures would have finished him off. His family would have never had answers. I don't know his name or anything other than what we witnessed. We are fine. Our trauma of finding a body is nothing compared to what his family would have endured, never knowing what happened to him. I was at the shooting range once, my first time actually, and an older gentleman shot himself in the stall closest to the door. Everyone had to walk right past his body to evacuate. Gruesome. It looks more disturbing and real life than the movies, and everything moved more slowly once I saw it. I was just getting comfortable with my weapon when they called a ceasefire, and I stood there wondering what had happened. Suddenly it was calls of everybody get out. Now, go, go. Pretty terrifying when you can't initially see what's on either side of you because of the lane barriers and you're wondering what the hell happened so bad we are evacuating. Then just really sad to realize what happened. There was a kid there about 10 years old with his dad and brother. Hate it. Was it accidental or suicide? Can't tell from your post. Suicide. Cops figured out later in the day he'd even left a note for his ex-wife saying he was suicidal and outlining his plan. She just didn't believe it. She felt like shit. Probably still does. It was his last call for help. Back in the mid-80s, fresh out of college, got a job on a survey crew for the summer working on a section of highway just off of Interstate 80 in Wyoming. We always came across dead animals that had been hit by cars. But one day we had pulled off in a secured spot to eat lunch when we saw something out in the field, literally 40 miles from the nearest town, flopping around. We just passed it off as some deer that had been hit by a car and had crawled into the field to die. We went on and ate our lunch. Before we went back to work, our survey crew leader said, "Let's go take a look at what that is." The closer we got, we all knew it was a human being. She was still alive. Barely, but still alive. We radioed in what we discovered, and within about 30 minutes an air ambulance was on the scene. Before the ambulance got there, we gave her water, but didn't move her. She couldn't speak, but we could tell she was thankful we were there and found her. They flew her down to Colorado, where she made a full recovery. Turned out she was traveling cross country with her boyfriend when they got into an argument and he decided to off her and dump her body. Thing was, she wasn't dead when he dumped her body. Where we found her, he had beat her and strangled her with a rope, and when she passed out he thought she was dead and dumped her. Never heard any more, but only know she made a full recovery and the guy went to prison. Found my dad dead, heart attack, one morning as a 7-year-old. Then when I was 8 I found my grandfather dead, fell, hit his head into tub full of water one morning. I used to work at this sports bar, so it wasn't uncommon for people to leave their car in parking lot for a day or two. After having a couple days off, I come into work and this car that was there a day before my weekend started is still parked in the same spot. I tell me boss about it and go check it out. As I get close to the car, the smell hits me like a truck. Some guy committed suicide in his car during a heatwave in the middle of summer. I call the cops and tell my boss. When the police arrived, I was asked to make a statement. While I was doing this, the paramedics showed up to remove the body. They got this bloated, rotten corpse halfway out of the vehicle when it just fell apart, splattering on the pavement. I'll never forget that ducking smell. I had a friend in grad school who was a paramedic. She has a similar story, except the body had been sitting for a week. To this day she can't eat avocados. Edit, yes. My usernames is ihat_Ravis. But that's just a coincidence. I hated avocados long before my friend told me this story. We did bond over our mutual dislike for avocados though. Got back to my GF's house after doing some grocery shopping for her mom. And when we went inside, something was off. Found her older brother with slit wrists in the tub just about the time their mom pulled into the driveway. It was unpleasant. I went to California for vacation. 2002, and naturally we went to see San Francisco. Walked over the Golden Gate Bridge and there's this lookout point you can see it all from. While looking at the bridge, it looked like someone dumped a rolled up rug from the bridge. No one around me reacts, so I figure I must be right. My family and I go walk across the bridge and I look at the point I saw the rug. There was a body on the cement below. I just looked at it for a long time trying to think of a way this isn't real. My dad had seen the person jump, but he wasn't sure either. We both kind of snapped back to reality at the same time and just looked at each other. There was a phone on the bridge to call police on, and that's what my father did. They told us to sit and wait for them. As soon as my dad hung up the phone, he went to his knees and had a bit of a breakdown. I didn't know how to handle it and didn't do or say much about it. Once the police arrived, they said they were sorry we saw that on our vacation, but it happens at least once a week. That blew my mind. That so many people go to the Golden Gate to kill themselves. I was only 12, so I didn't process the death like an adult would. I felt disconnected from it, and to this day it doesn't feel like it was real, but more of a video someone showed me. Found 4, all at once. Well, actually, the 4th body had been jammed so far under the front passenger seat that I didn't see it. Wear your damned seatbelts, people. I called in a drunk driver one night. I had a friend whose dad was a policeman, so I asked if he'd heard about it a couple days later. Turns out that because I called, that got the cops over to that side of town looking for the drunk driver, and that meant that they had found the scene of the crash in time to save the passenger's life. I used to work in self-storage, and when I left, a buddy of mine took over the property I used to manage. We took a weekend off from our respective jobs to go to Vegas a few years ago. He lived on site in a company apartment. When we got back late in the evening, he walked around his property as is pretty typical. There was a car park with someone in it. He knocked on the window and got no response. He called me and told me about it, and as I was close by, I told him I'd be right there. As I got close to the car, I could smell death. The car was locked and all the windows were fogged up inside. It was obvious that the person inside was dead. He called the police and they responded with fire and medical. Yeah, the guy was dead. Reviewing the security cameras showed him come in and parked there about 36 hours earlier. It was an overdose. I don't think it was ever determined to be accidental or suicide. One night I was out walking my dog along a country road where a ditch accompanied the road either side. As I was walking, my dog started going mad trying to tug away from his lead to this ditch, so I wanted to see what it was. It ended up being a corpse, so I called the cops. They found out that a gang murder happened in a city about 40 miles away, and one of the members thought a small village would be a great place to put it. Not me, but my dad did. He was fishing and found a guy floating in the Kentucky River. He at first thought it was a dead cow until he paddled closer. The man was badly decomposed and bloated. Our local small town sheriff's department used my dad's boat to transport the body. My dad had trouble sleeping for a while afterward and sold the boat a few weeks later. My grandpa found a body decades earlier in the same area and my uncle did too. It's believed the guy my dad found accidentally fell in while high on meth. I found my dad after he hung himself. It was obviously extremely traumatizing and has taken a lot of therapy. I still get triggered if a movie shows a hanging scene, but I'm doing a lot better. Came across a drunk driving accident. Probably happened a minute or two before we drove up to it, since no one else was there, and it was on the highway. It was awful. Called the cops and went to see if we could help, but they were clearly dead. One had been ejected out of the windshield and was lying on the highway. Found my uncle dead in his apartment. I learned that day what a rotting body smells like. The answer is rancid fish. I've seen 2 people die, one hit by a car and the other in a workplace accident, and it's something I hope to never have to see again. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.